And our first main topic today gets submitted to us by Gabriel, who writes, I was wondering if you had seen the news that David Gordon Green is going to write and direct a sequel to The Exorcist, similar to his Halloween trilogy, and that Universal and Peacock plan to make the trilogy of these Exorcist films for $400 million, with Gordon Green set to write the following installments. This is huge, because the price tag is close to what Netflix paid for the Knives Out sequels. Well, not really, because for Knives Out, they paid over $400 just for 2 films. But what are your thoughts on this? And is this a good move for Universal and Peacock? Thanks, and bring on the filthy. All right, thanks a lot for sending that in, man. And yeah, listen, when you look at what David Gordon Green, and you look just what's been done in the last number of years with Halloween, right? The Halloween franchise, which I have not liked a single film in the Halloween franchise. Not one.
Not even the first?
Not even the first. I went back and watched the original a few years ago. I thought, this doesn't hold up at all. I don't even like the first. I know that makes me very unpopular amongst my friends. I know my opinion is completely in the minority. It's an all-time horror classic. I get it. But then they decide to bring back Jamie Lee Curtis, which they had done before. But this time, it was imagining all the other Halloween films didn't exist, except for the original. And they were going to pick it up from there. And I ate it up. I really enjoyed that Halloween film that came out a couple of years ago. It's the first time I had that much fun with a Halloween film. And so I'll tell you what, the basic idea of a lot of these same guys getting together and getting a classic like The Exorcist and bringing it together to make something, it's got merit. Now, this comes to us from the folks over at Variety who write, Universal is shelling out an eye-popping $400 million to buy a new Exorcist trilogy with plans to screen some of the films on Peacock, which I hate. Anyway, its new streaming service. I don't hate Peacock. I just hate this plan. Anyway, its new streaming service. In a coup, Ellen Burstyn is in the Oscar-winning actress who first did Battle with the Devil in the 1973 original, will reprise her role as Chris McNeil. David Gordon Green, the filmmaker of the studio's latest Halloween reboot, is directing the upcoming Exorcist franchise, which will be produced by Blumhouse. All right, so listen, I like this in general. When you look at the success they had with Halloween, and you see all the anticipation there is for the next one, and you see taking that type of an approach and that type of a strategy to try to do that same thing with The Exorcist and bringing in the original actress, that's great. Here's the one part for me, guys, that gets a little head scratching. They paid $400 million for this. 400, like Knives Out, which got that, I think it was like a $426 million deal for 2 films. But that's a new film, just had all this Oscar buzz. You know, a lot of people love that movie. I love that movie. It's kind of hot. It's contemporary. I get it. But even for Knives Out, when we saw that $426 million price tag, we were like, whoa, $400 million? And I'll be honest with you guys, I just don't know if the appetite is there for Exorcist. Rob, you know, you are far more connected in with Exorcist than I. And I know you probably have some thoughts on this. You hear about this deal. Number one, do you think this is something that was this worth $400 million for Universal to pay out? What do you think in general about the idea of bringing Ellen back in for this? And how do you think the audience is going to respond to it?
Oh boy, those are a lot of questions, John. As people know, the Exorcist is not only my favorite horror film of all time, it's one of my favorite movies of all time. And I think it redefined genre movies, horror films especially, forever. And I think, obviously, the Exorcist sequel track record is a bit spotty. Exorcist 2, The Heretic is some people would say it's one of the worst movies ever made. I'd say it's definitely interesting. I love Exorcist 3, written and directed by William Peter Blatty, who wrote the original. Then, of course, you had the 2 competing Exorcist movies, one by Rennie Harlan, one by Paul Schrader. And then you had the Exorcist TV series with Gina Davis, the first season, which was actually pretty good. And I think that bringing Ellen Burstyn back, and again, I just said this about the Ghostbusters franchise, this is going to be a canonical in-universe sequel to the original Exorcist. Now, for me, this could go either way. It could be just a horrible, awful blunder, or it could end up being quite good. I mean, what does What if you go back to the messaging of the original film, which is really about a priest who loses his faith in God and in confronting what is a manifestation of the devil comes to believe again. There's a lot of really interesting things with our culture now that can be incorporated into the story. But to me, The Exorcist, going back to it tonally, it's a hard franchise to nail. You either go too far into the spitting please pea soup and having heads turn all the way around and the bad language and all of that over the top stuff, and I think that kind of misses the point. But like, they're approaching this like, what is this now, the Lord of the Rings? We're gonna make 3 movies and spend $400 million. I mean, they don't even do that for Star Wars. So my question is, why? I mean, the original Exorcist mostly is set in a house. And it's terrible. Mostly set in a house during the day. And it's mostly horrifying. Yes, the final Exorcist takes place at night, but most of the horrific stuff that happens in The Exorcist happens in daylight, like in Kubrick's The Shining, until the end. And why would you spend $400 million? I just don't understand. And Blumhouse, which has got such a great track record of doing sort of original stuff. Shyamalan did The Visit. You had Lee Wanell reinvent Invisible Man, and they were doing this kind of stuff for less than $10 million. And now Blumhouse has sort of turned around, and they're doing Firestarter, they're doing Halloween, they're rebooting The Exorcist. And while all this stuff can be good, I really liked their low budget model of making new or unique visions with people that were new. And I just watching them embrace, like, I get it. Everyone, Jason Blum got to get paid. I understand that. But man, and Ellen Burstyn got to eat. But really, I mean, they better put out something that is Look, when I say Lord of the Rings, if this is the Lord of the Rings of horror, God bless them. But $400 million? I mean, you could make 10 or 20 $10 million movies and still have $100 million or $200 million left to make 3 Exorcist films.
Okay, but I should remind us here, though, that they're not necessarily spending $400 million on making these films. Universal just paid $400 million for the rights to have them once they're made. I mean, they could make these films for, $70 million each if they wanted to. So, so we don't know. So what we know is what Universal's paying for them. We don't know what the actual production budget's going to be on them yet. So there might be some separation there. I don't know, but I totally get, I totally understand and get what you're saying on that as well. Let me ask you this, Scott. You see this as well. By the way, our friend Karoom Potts sends in like a $10 super chat badge in live chat. Thank you, Karoom. Appreciate that, man. Scott, you had a chance to check out, this story. This is, of course, a classic IP. People love this franchise. I mean, at least everybody knows about them and remembers it. It's been sticking around. You got Ellen Burstyn back. What do you think about the sounds of this deal?
Okay, well, listen, the price tag for the rights, $400 million, that definitely made me go, what? And I agree with basically everything that Rob just said about it. I mean, the original Exorcist from 1973, it was nominated for 10 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. And I think that makes it like the first true horror movie to be nominated for Best Picture. So Ellen Burstyn, she's now 88 years old. She is an Oscar winner for Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. She was nominated for 5 other Academy Awards, including for Best Actress for The Exorcist. And she's also a 2-time Emmy winner for Political Animals and an episode of Law and Order SVU. So listen, the fact that they're going to try to replicate the model with reinventing the Halloween. I love the original Exorcist. And those 2 movies, along with Rosemary's Baby and The Shining, are like my all-time favorite horror movies ever, as well as Night of the Living Dead. But I just think that there's actually more of a chance to reinvent it because there weren't as many Exorcist sequels as there were Halloween sequels. My concern about doing an all-new Exorcist trilogy is this. The original film is so freaking scary, even after all these years. it still holds up. It is still a terrifying movie to watch. You could watch The Exorcist during the day with the windows open and sun shining in, and it would still be a terrifying movie. The problem is that you've had so many other films in which exorcists have taken place that they become cliched, they become conventional. It's been done over and over again.
We just saw it again in the last Conjuring movie. Like even the last Conjuring just did that. Yeah.
The last Conjuring movie just did that. And unfortunately, the problem is that the last Conjuring felt like a cliche. It felt conventional. It felt like a generic Exorcist type of movie. So even though you have someone like David Gordon Green, who did a great job with 2018's Halloween, that was a movie that made $256 million worldwide. I just think like, well, what's going to be different? How is he going to make it different? How is he going to make it like so different and so relevant? Like, how is he going to make it like this is a movie that we needed? That's my biggest concern is like, if you're going to bring back Ellen Burstyn and it's an Exorcist movie, it better be damn good.
If I could just echo some of that sentiment, the one thing about the original Exorcist is it is very transgressive. When you watch it, it touches on things and does so in a way that is truly taboo breaking. And
especially for the time. Especially for the time.
Even now, one of my favorite things to do, believe it or not, is I love watching teenage girls do reaction videos to The Exorcist, because it shows me the film still has power. When you watch that, these girls are like, I can't believe what I'm seeing, because we live in a society that won't go there anymore.
Yeah.
And if you're going to update The Exorcist, we live in a time where I don't know if our audiences are mature enough to handle it. I mean, would it become a case of hashtag call whatever? The Exorcist goes too far. I mean, there's subjects that used to be touched on routinely in movies that I don't think we can do anymore. And I'm curious as to how would I think the time is ripe to do an Exorcist and really destroy some of the boundaries that have been put up in our culture. I think we've been infantilized a little bit, all of us, and we're no longer mature enough to handle an Exorcist movie, to be honest. But maybe what The Exorcist did in 1973, they have a way that they are going to be able to do it in 2022 or 23, whenever the movie comes out.
October 13th, 2023. And I want to say, Rob, that Exorcist 3, I love that film. I love Exorcist 3 as much as I love Halloween 3. Both of those movies are really underrated, and both of those movies are really damn good.
Exorcist 3 has the single greatest jump scare in the history of cinema. If you don't go to YouTube and watch the jump scare.
No, because
you've got to see it in the context of the movie, because I was in the theater opening night in Westwood when Exorcist 3 opened, and it was the very first time a jump scare got a round of applause. The entire theater, and it was by the way, it was the number one movie the weekend it opened, Exorcist 3.
Well, anyway, guys,
and it has Patrick Ewing and Fabio in a dream sequence.
The question is for you guys. What do you think about these? Are huge numbers. Like, returning to do more Exorcist movies with Ellen Burstyn. That sounds great. $400 million. What are your guys' reactions to this? Jump down into the comment section below and let us know your thoughts.